A long time ago, syrup came directly from the maple tree, Ninatig, at a very difficult time of year when food was scarce. The animals and the birds depended on this syrup to survive the long winter. Today, we tap trees and use buckets to collect the sap. We use equipment to boil it into syrup, and we need a storage system for the syrup or sugar. The Anishinaabeg food system includes food sources from the water and from the land at different times of the year. Sugarbush, Ninatagan, is one of our spring equinox foods. Watch for signs like chickadees and squirrels eating the sapsicles. You may notice sap dripping down from the broken off twigs of sugar maples. Start tapping when the temperatures go above 0 degrees centigrade in the daytime and fall below 0 degrees centigrade at night. Traditionally, when we go out to gather something, we give our tobacco as a way of saying thanks to the creatures and the plants that give us food and medicine. We learn how to gather and turn Ninatikabu into syrup and sugar from the animals, our families, our communities, and our Anishinaabeg stories. Ninatikabu translates into sugar maple juice, sweet water, and maple sap. This is cultural transmission. In this video, we will teach one recipe for making maple syrup. In the sugar bush, you are dealing with dangers including fire, boiling sap, widowmaker trees, and sharp tools you use to get your wood. Start with clean equipment and make good paths between the trees. When drilling your holes, drill on a slight upward angle, holding your drill steady. Take a small stick and ream out the hole of sawdust. Flatten the snowbank beneath the trees so your jug sits flat. Tap the spile into the hole until it's tight, but not too tight, because if you tap it too hard, it will split the hole and the hole will leak. You may be wondering which trees to tap. Tap sugar maples that are at least 12 inches in diameter, not circumference. Larger trees are preferable. At our sugar bush, we put 2 taps for a 12-inch tree. Tap on the south side of the tree where it will have the earliest run of sap. Look for large, healthy roots and healthy limbs, and drill your holes over top of the large roots and below the healthy limbs. An ideal height is 3 to 5 feet above ground level, depending on the snow depth, the type of equipment for collecting sap, and stain wood. Place tap holes about 12 inches apart. The smaller hole you make, the faster the tree will heal. Many people do not have easy access to trees, so you may have to be creative to find trees. First Nations band councils, Ministry of Natural Resources, private landowners, farmers, universities, and some municipalities allow the tapping of urban trees. To start a sugar bush, decide how much you want to produce or how much you're capable of producing. 40 liters of sap boils down to 1 liter of syrup. It's possible to make 1 liter of syrup per tree. Some people like their syrup thicker than commercial grade, in which case you will get less than 1 liter of syrup per tree. The sap needs to be collected from the trees and brought to the evaporator at the end of the day before it has a chance to freeze in buckets overnight. Frozen sap will still be good when it thaws, but it is inconvenient to deal with partially frozen, partially thawed sap. We store our sap in 200-liter food-grade plastic barrels near our evaporator until we have enough to boil. Sap may ferment if left for more than 2 days in warm weather, or thunderstorms may sour the sap. You can also use plastic sap lines, which gravitate sap directly from the trees to collection receptacles. That Nanabush. He sure made a lot of work for everybody. The fire which is needed for boiling is very dangerous and needs to be contained in a boiler. Don't try to do everything yourself. When you have something heavy to move, get help. We made our boiler from a recycled residential oil furnace tank. It cost $50 for the tank, and it took 2 people about 1 day to make it. Make sure you have good, dry, seasoned split firewood. I got this firewood from my father-in-law Steve. We can never give enough thanks for this good food. We offer sama, muskadewashk, kizik, and wingashk for thanks, safety, and good times. We use a 3 by 4 foot graduated stainless steel flat pan. We can boil about 400 liters of sap in a day. We coat the outside of the pans with liquid dish soap so that it's easier to clean after boiling. We use steel wool for a gasket to contain the fire in the furnace. We fill the pans with sap before we start to boil. We start the fire at sunrise and get a good, hard, rolling boil going as fast as possible. Ah, sap coffee. I wait all year for sap coffee.
Sugar Bush coffee. Cheers.
Cheers.
This is one of the best parts of the sugar bush when you're working outside. Cleaning up around the sugar bush is a safety concern and a tidiness concern. It will get slippery, wet, and sloppy if you don't shovel the snow from around the boiling pan. We ladle sap from the warming pan into one section of the boiling pan so we don't cool off the boiling sap. We pail sap from the holding barrel through a filter into the warming pan to collect sawdust that has come out of the holes in the taps. We skim foam that forms in the boiling pan with a metal strainer. We pour all the sap into the boiling pan when it can all fit. It's a dangerous job, so make sure you have help. We add the sap into the same one section of the graduated pan. This allows the sap in the rest of the pan to continue boiling. A good steady boil helps keep the color of syrup light. We've been boiling all day. We've boiled 200 liters of sap. It is now reduced to ½ inch in the bottom of the pan. When sap is almost syrup, it can easily foam up and boil over, so we remove the fire to have more control. We start by ladling the hot sap off and pouring it through a filter into a pan that we will bring inside. The filter catches the ash from the fire. It is much easier to filter the ash from the fire before it is syrup. Be careful. This sap is very hot and we don't want to spill it or burn ourselves. The next day, after having a good rest, we ladle the almost syrup into the finishing pan in the house on the stove. As I said before, when it starts to turn into syrup, it's so easy to boil over. Keep your eye on it constantly, because it will foam up and spill all over the place, burning you or somebody else and getting everything very sticky. A constant boil will form a byproduct we call in Anishinaabe pita. This is good to eat. When using a regular thermometer, The finishing point of syrup is 7 degrees Fahrenheit above the boiling point of water. We use a maple syrup hydrometer to measure the density of our syrup. At this stage, we stop around 55 Brix, which is thinner than finished syrup to allow for faster sedimentation. We pre-warm our sediment bottles to 107 degrees Fahrenheit. We ladle the bottles until they are full. We put on the caps, wipe off the bottles, and let them sediment for 2 to 3 days. We prefer settling the maple sand and siphoning off the clarified syrup rather than filtering the syrup because in the past we've filtered the syrup too much and lost some of the maple flavor. Okay, the syrup has sedimented. Be very careful not to disturb the sediment while moving and opening the sediment jars. We use a 3/8 inch flexible plastic hose with a kitchen skewer attached to one end by zip ties to hold it stiff. We siphon the clarified syrup into the finishing pan in which we will boil it one more time prior to finish bottling. As the syrup gets down in the bottle, be very careful because the siphon wants to suck the maple sand off the bottom of the jars. We don't want that to happen. The maple syrup sand is perishable. We save it in the fridge to use for baking and sweetening. So, here we are at the final stage of boiling the clarified syrup. We bring it to a nice, steady, even boil. Once properly finished, syrup will last for many years without spoiling. Commercial syrup is 66 to 68 Brix. We want our syrup to be thicker than commercial syrup, so we boil it longer. We use a clean commercial coffee percolator with the basket removed to keep the syrup close to the boiling point while bottling. The nozzle makes filling the finishing bottles easier and less wasteful. We preheat our finishing bottles in the oven to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. We fill the bottles as much as possible to eliminate airspace. Ensure the caps are tight. We turn the bottles upside down for a few seconds to sterilize the lids. As the bottles are cooling, keep them away from drafts because they may break. As they cool, you may see bubbles rising in the syrup. When cold, there will be an airspace at the top of the bottle.